Okay, so tonight's talk, we're going to be talking about UFOs and aliens. And the question that I'm going to try to answer for everyone is UFO visitations and alien encounters. How should we as Christians understand these? And I have a little cartoon here. Enough of that. As always, we're the Biblical Creation Science Ministry. Our purpose is to exalt Jesus Christ. We want to teach the true meaning, the truth in the Bible. We want to equip the saints, you the saints that are going to encounter the world, and ask you to go and tell the world, just like Jesus in his great command told us to go make disciples of the world. So the outline of the talk is brief, but the talk is long. It's a real pleasure, as I said before, to welcome the people from the internet, and thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you can watch our presentations in the future. We're going to discuss, what does the world say? It's like the question that Jesus asked his apostles. He said, what does the world say? He wanted to know. And then, what do you say? And then we're going to cover a little bit about science and see some renowned scientists that talk about aliens. But we're also going to deal with science from the standpoint of what are the facts of science that either would or would not allow aliens to come and visit the earth. Then we're going to talk about UFOs, unidentified flying objects, and aliens. Are they real? And alien visitations. You hear of this every so often. Movies have been made about it. People who actually encounter aliens, abductions, things like that. Are they real? And what does it mean, again, to Christianity? And what does the Bible say? What are the warnings that the Bible gives us in order to help us understand and deal with these things as Christians? So the book that stimulated me to choose this subject is called Alien Intrusion. It's by a gentleman named Gary Bates. He's the head of the U.S. Creation Ministries International, and they have a website called creation.com. As I say, he's from Australia. He's migrated to the United States of America, and he's been involved with UFOs as a child, and as he grew up, he never lost that fascination. So he maintained a file, and then recently he gathered that file together and wrote the book, and it actually is one of the top 50 sellers on Amazon, and was reputed to be the only creationist book that ever achieved that feat. And he believes strongly in creation, and he's actually one of the reasons, again, why I chose this is because our church and our pastor is pushing us as a congregation to go out and encounter the world. We want to go interact with the people who live in the secular world. As this United States of America is becoming less and less Christian, we need to go out and interact with the world and bring Christianity and bring the word to those people who are suffering because they don't have it. And so by dealing with a cultural element, this is one of what pastor calls 7 mountains: education, religion, family, media. Arts and entertainment are one of the key mountains that he identified. And this is going to be a movie that will reach people. And it's really a magnificent way to start a conversation. The movie is targeted to be out in December of this year. And so around Christmas time, you can ask people, well, have you seen Alien Intrusion? What do you think? And that gets the conversation started in a very non-threatening way. And then you can go and start discussing. And if you've seen the movie, you can discuss it, or you can just discuss Christianity in general and try to lead them along to the right path. So I looked up in internet, and one of the first movies ever made was called A Trip to the Moon. Le Voyage dans la Lune. It's a trip to the moon. It's a French movie done as a silent movie with French language at the bottom of the screen. You can actually watch it. I have a picture on the right where you click the button, you can watch it. It's a hilarious movie about shooting men to the moon, and when they get there, they discover that there's an alien race of people who jump around a lot. That was what I took away from it, since I can't read French, so it was interesting. So it just says that over 100 years, 115 years, we've been fascinated, we've been bombarded with media, movies that deal with aliens. And then the second one I pulled up was quite famous. It's the radio presentation by H.G. Wells called War of the Worlds, 1938. Some of you are old enough to remember that. It caused panic within the nation because it was put on as a pseudo news show, and the news show was playing music, but they kept interrupting the show to present these bulletins about Martians landing, and then they were killing people, and it caused a panic. And so we're still faced with fake news even today. So that was it's coming up on the 80th anniversary of that show. Doesn't seem possible, but then you go to the grocery store and you're walking out the checkout line, and as you're putting your groceries on that moving belt, you see things like that. Space aliens captured by the U.S. Navy. Those are always present. But what if we saw something like this? Aliens invade London, taking over the world. London panics, they're going to surrender. What would you think? What would you do? And this one's even more frightening to me. What if they came and say, we're come in peace. We want to establish heaven on earth. Just worship us. That's a message that a lot of the people who have alien encounters are hearing from the aliens that they think that they're talking to. And then the two scientists that I pulled up were, one is Stephen Hawking. He's a famous astrophysicist from Cambridge University in England. He said he strongly believes in aliens and warns that the Earth could be at risk of invasion. Massive ships which could come and try to colonize our planet and plunder our resources. And this is one of the leaders of the scientific community. And the other gentleman I pulled up was Sir Francis Crick, again, an Englishman. He was a co-discoverer of the shape and the structure of DNA, the life-giving molecule that programs all of the characteristics of every living organism on Earth. And he concluded by studying the DNA, it was impossible that DNA could have arisen by chance. So what was his solution? He invented something called panspermia, where he believes that an alien race somewhere out in the vast cosmos was dying, and they put bacteria onto a small spaceship and sent these spaceships all over the galaxy. And then one or more landed on Earth, and from all those bacteria, then everything evolved. So even these two eminent scientists, he's won the Nobel Prize, are talking about aliens to their colleagues, to the world. Their reputation is on the line. Are these aliens, or are they something else? So I pulled up a piece of scripture from Matthew, and it's where the people are asking Jesus, tell us, teacher, when will the sign of your coming and the end of the age be? And Jesus says, at that time, if anyone says to you, look, there's the Messiah, or there he is, do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear, and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even Christ's own elect, God's elect. So we have to beware. We've been warned by Jesus directly that in end times we could be facing great delusions, and so we have to be careful. And one of those delusions could very well be alien visitation. And then one thing I wanted to do was I wanted to also link this up to the evolution connection. We see evolution permeate all of science, and you would think, well, how does evolution fit with aliens? And so we actually have, I looked in the vault of the recordings of past BCS presentations, and there's one called God's Unique Earth that was put on some time ago, and it's at the website wordcast.us. And there I went through all of the 68, and there are actually many more factors, but there are 68 factors that are required in order for life to be on a planet. And we hear about these things. I don't know if you've heard about exoplanets. These are planets that are circling stars that are way out from our solar system. And those planets are supposed to have life on them, some of them, if they're in the right position with regard to the star. So how the evolution connection comes about is, so we say, the scientists say evolution has caused life on Earth to evolve by chance. So that's factor one. Number two, there are trillions and trillions of stars, and around those stars there are innumerable planets called exoplanets circling those distant stars. And so you have trillions and trillions of planets, then it follows that doubtlessly evolution has occurred elsewhere. And that evolution might, in fact, be millions of years more advanced than Earth. So if they evolved a million years before we did into whatever beings they are, then they would have a million years head start on us, and they might be visiting us. So that's one hypothesis that you hear over and over and over. And so I wanted to address that. And there really, if you look at the physics, the basic physics based on what we know today, there are really 6 virtually insurmountable problems. All 6 of them are problems that are virtually impossible. I say it's effectively impossible to have interstellar travel because of these 6 factors. And so I'm going to go through them really carefully and really briefly, but hopefully you can understand what the difficulties are.
You're going to disprove Star Trek?
Yes. It's be my pleasure. So problem number 1 is the distance between objects in space is enormous. So on the left, the first column I have is a list of objects. And the moon, the sun, Pluto, which used to be a planet, and now the astronomers have said, no, it isn't a planet. We don't want you kicked off the island. Look at the closest star, which is called Proxima Centauri. We'll look at the distance across the Milky Way to the nearest next galaxy next to the Milky Way, and then to the next galaxy after that. And light, the traditional measure of distance is called a light year. You think it's a measure of time, but it's not. It's a measure of distance. It's the distance that light travels. If you turn on a laser at T0, how far does it get in a year? And the answer is approximately 6 trillion miles. So in 1 year, light travels 6 trillion miles. So in the first column that has times associated with it, I just list the speed of light, how long it would take light to travel From the Earth to the Moon, 1.3 seconds. So 1.3 seconds from turn on a light on Earth, it's visible on the Moon. On the Sun, it takes a little over 8 minutes. So I rounded it up to 9 minutes. So 9 minutes for light to go from the Sun to the Earth, or the Earth to the Sun. Time for light to go to Pluto, 5 hours. The time for the light to go to the nearest star is 4.3 years, so that's 4.3 light years. Time across the Milky Way, if you want to shine a light across the Milky Way, it takes 100,000 years for the light to get across the Milky Way. And then the next nearest galaxy that's close to the next closest one to the Milky Way, 2 million years for light at 6 trillion at the speed of light, 186,000 miles a minute. And then to the next nearest galaxy after that, 20 million years. So then I calculated using the very fastest spaceship that we have ever produced on Earth. And it's a giant spaceship, and they were shooting a very small object into space to see how fast they could get it to go. And it basically was able to achieve 42,000 miles per hour, which is pretty fast. But if you took that spaceship and said, how long would it go to the Moon? It takes only 6 hours to get to the Moon. To the Sun, 2,400 hours. To Pluto, 9 years. And to the closest star, almost 69,000 years. So if you wanted to jump on a spaceship, head out towards the nearest star, Proxima Centauri, and go there, 69,000 years, you'd be there. And then if you wanted to go across the Milky Way, it's millions. And it just, the distances are incredible. We don't appreciate that when we look out into the night sky. Yes, Jim?
Is that talking about the same gravity we have? In other words, the density out in space is as prohibitive as it is closer to Earth?
No, any massive object, every object that has mass has gravity. We don't feel it when we stand next to each other. Unless you stand next to a pretty woman, then you're gravitationally attracted to her. But if it's two guys, there's no gravity that we feel. But if there's two massive objects.
The speeds are going within our gravity. When it sees that,
you're pretty much.
the speed isn't increasing.
Yeah, well, it's pretty much this is at a constant rate. The spaceship is not accelerating, because the other problem is if you're accelerating, then you have to be burning energy, fuel. So what it says is you take off, you boost your rocket to a maximum speed, 42,000 miles per hour, and then you shut the engine off and just coast, because there's no gravity is not strong enough to pull you one way or the other. You're just flying through empty space. You're not running the engines all the time, because you need the fuel to stop. When you get to wherever you want to go, you're going 42,000 miles per hour, and here comes the planet that you want to visit. There's no way to slam on the brakes. You've got to turn the spacecraft around, and just like they landed on the Moon, they turned the lunar lander backwards, and then they went down on top of the Moon by running the rocket engine to slow their descent. So you've got to have the fuel when you get to where you're going in order to slow you down and stop you so you can land.
Well, is there a distance? I'm thinking of the miles per hour you say you're going. If that was within our sphere, then you could turn it off and you just keep on going?
Yeah, you just keep on.
It would be true, would it?
Yeah, no, it would, because we have launched a spacecraft called Voyager many, many years ago, and it's out past the edge of the solar system. It's past Pluto, and it's just heading out there. There's nothing to stop you.
But within our atmosphere.
Well, in our
if you
atmosphere.
had that speed up and you turned off the engine.
Well, you have air resistance, but in outer space, there's no air resistance.
There must be more resistance closer to the Earth than is.
Right. As you go higher and higher, the molecules of gas that are around any of the bodies is lower and lower, so it becomes almost no resistance. But when you're flying an airplane, as you've experienced, when you flew an airplane, you turn off the motor, you go down and you slow down real fast.
I found that true. The ground is hard.
So this just says, I think, yes, Marty.
So the only reason why we're going through this exercise is to find life in the universe.
Right, or sometimes people, they'll say, well, what happens if planet Earth, what if the sun exploded? What if we found out information that the sun is going to explode? Or what if we see a giant comet coming directly at Earth and we can't blow it up? So we would have to evacuate. But it's nonsense, because you need a 69,000 year supply of food and whatever else. And you talk about freezing embryos or putting people in the state of, they put people in the state of suspended animation and in cryogenically, and then when actually the power failed and the person thawed, they didn't wake up. So, I don't think freezing is the way to go. But I think, the heavens declare the glory of God. That's what I think. Why did God make the universe so big? If we're stuck here on planet Earth and you see all that stuff out there as we invent telescopes by Galileo, and then we have Mount Palomar Observatory, and we can go down to Griffiths Park and look through a big telescope, or we have the Hubble telescope. Why do we need that? Because we're examining the glory of God. That's just an indication of what He has the capability of doing. So number two is I'll try to get through this quickly. Number two is that the maximum speed that the ship has to be slower than the speed of light. That's Einstein's theory of relativity. There's no particle that has finite mass that you can accelerate to the speed of light. It takes, under his theory, infinite energy to do that. Even in the Large Hadron Collider that they've built in France and Switzerland, they're accelerating electrons or some particle, and they go from 99.999% to 99.9999%. They don't get to 1. They never get to 1. So clearly, aliens may have a technology that is going to be faster than what we have if they're 1 million years more advanced. But they're probably not going to be going half the speed of light. Maybe a tenth or something like that, or 100th, but not the speed of light. And then the other thing is the massive amount of energy it takes to go on these journeys to the stars. You have this equation where you have a space shuttle on the launch pad. So that space shuttle is filled with rocket fuel, and that's called potential energy. We haven't ignited the rocket fuel. And what we need to do is take that potential energy and the rocket fuel and turn it into kinetic energy as the ship progresses up to the mission it's supposed to accomplish. So the energy, the kinetic energy, is called K equals 1/2 times the mass times the velocity squared. So you can get the spaceship up to the point where it will orbit the Earth, but to get it up to light speed or a fraction thereof, it wouldn't. It would be enormous. And the calculation that I did was, if you weigh the space shuttle, it weighs 2,200 tons. At liftoff. If you want to put that into a trajectory going to the nearest star at 1/10 the speed of light, you need 66 times the total electrical energy output of the whole United States for 66 years. So everybody has to turn their lights off for 66 years. They store that energy, and then we can send one of those probes out there. So do you think we're going to escape Earth if something come crashing into us? I don't think so. And then the other problem is radio waves, light waves, any electromagnetic radiation travels at the speed of light. It doesn't have any mass. It's made of photons, so it travels at the speed of light. But if you're ET and you want to phone home, and the nearest star is 4.3 years away, and your wife calls you and says, honey, we need some milk. It takes 4.3 years for that message to get to you, and then you send her back the message, yes, I'll pick something up when I go to the store and bring it home, and that takes another 4.3 years to get back, 8.6 years. So communication, if you're an alien out there doing things in the universe, you're all by yourself. You have no communication with anybody, unless you want to wait 8 years. And then the other thing is that they found out by sending these probes out, like the Voyager and other things, that there are small particles. They sent out probes with, sticky paper on it or whatever, flown it around, and they bring it back and they look at it in the lab, and sure enough, there's all kinds of little dust dots and things like that. Well, a dust dot, a grain of sand isn't going to threaten you if you hit a grain of sand with your car going 60 or 160 miles an hour. But if you're going at a tenth the speed of light, that dust, that little grain of sand is going to be the same as that, a 10 megaton explosion. So your ship is going to disappear real quick for one grain of sand. And then the last thing is, when you're changing direction, again, if you've flown or if you've taken a roller coaster ride, the G-forces. And G-forces are thrilling up to a certain level. If you're going through a few Gs, you are excited and your heart pounds and blood rushes to your face or anything. But when you start getting to the realm of 50 or 100 Gs, that's 50 or 100 times the pull of gravity on these turns or changes of direction, it's going to either injure you so severely or it will kill you. Your blood vessels will burst, your eyes will pop out of their sockets, things like that. And you always see the captain on these ships when they say, okay, we're going to light speed, everybody hold on to something, and you see them. It's like a cable car. It's absurd. So the G-forces, you would have to accelerate very slowly, and you would have to stop very slowly. You have to turn very slowly, just like the Queen Mary. It takes many, many miles to turn a big ship. And then the last thing, you hear wormholes. Somebody mentioned wormholes here. So wormholes are a theoretical construction, physical idea that are based on Einstein's equations. They are one solution of Einstein's equations. The things that they never tell you about wormholes is that there's always some assumption that they make, like having negative energy. So you have to have, in a theory, you have a positive number, or you have a negative number. It doesn't really matter. It's just a theory. If you go to the bank and you have a positive number, you come out smiling. If you go to the bank and you have a negative number, you don't feel so happy. So that's the case with these theories. You can plug in numbers, but you're not really obeying the laws of physics, because we have yet to discover negative energy. So, and the other question I have, would you like to be the first person through a wormhole? Okay, just jump right on in and you see where you go on the other side of the universe. So I think it's highly speculative, to say the least. So the summary is, interstellar space travel effectively impossible, I believe. Distances are too big, travel times take too long, energy requirements are too great, the dust kills you, the G-forces kill you, the wormholes kill you. So, sorry. I don't believe there's any aliens that's floating around out there or landed at Roswell or whatever. But there's a lot of people that do. When they did a survey, CNN has done a survey, Other companies have done surveys. Over 50% of the people, 54% in this one survey, believe that aliens from distant planets are visiting us on Earth. And only 42% of Americans believe that God is the Father of creation of everything. So we're past the 50% point right now. So this I'm rejecting. Another conjecture is they say, well, okay, so some people have given up, just like some of the scientists have given up on the theory that you can create DNA by chance. They say, okay, the distances are too big. I believe the aliens are not from outer space, but maybe they're far advanced Earthlings that have discovered how to do time travel, and they're coming back and visiting Earth the way it was, like you go on a field trip back to the past, not back to the future. Or they say it's mass hysteria. Some people say they don't believe that any of these sightings are real. It's mass hysteria. It's something made up by Hollywood. We have movies and television, and the young people have all the games that are based on outer space, books, science articles, talks, all about aliens. But the U.S. government, for over 50 years, has spent over $1 billion on a project, just one project, called SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, looking for radio signals from out there, looking for alien broadcasts. They found zero. They found nothing in that 50 years, and they, in fact, I think just recently canceled the funding, but it's still being carried on by some billionaires that are looking to have aliens in their backyard. And this was interesting. I looked up what are the 10 top ticket sales, not grossing because the price of tickets have gone up. Of the 10 top movies of sales, ticket sales of all time, other than Titanic, Spider-Man, and Jurassic Park, all of the other ones have to do with aliens. Star Wars, E.T., Independence Day. So we're being bombarded with movie after movie after movie about aliens from outer space. So finally, what are the aliens? If they're not the aforementioned things, what could they be? And the belief is, and this is really astonishing, this is one place in all of science where secular scientists who actually know their stuff and have studied this and are expert in it, and they're not New Age people. The New Age people have their own religion, so they believe in aliens no matter what. But if you're talking to a scientist who's a real scientist and has studied UFO issues for a long time, they'll say they agree with the Christians in this case that they are either spiritual beings or they're from other dimensions. And it's amazing. I mean, I looked at the 2 Corinthians when Paul was relating that he was taken to heaven. So if you consider that we are in a physical body that houses our spirit, but we can go to a state of prayer, and our Heavenly Father, if He sees fit, He can raise us up to see what heaven is like, and then bring us back. Well, what about aliens, or what about fallen angels? If angels are spirit beings, is it possible that they could take on a human body form, or the illusion of a human body? And that's what the rest of the talk is going to focus on. So who is occupants of this spirit world most all the time? And we're told clearly in many, many places in the Bible that God's central dwelling place is heaven. And we're told that God is spirit. John 4:24 says that God is spirit. The other, another group that are in heaven are the holy angels. I call them the holy angels because they're not fallen. When the great battle occurred between Lucifer and the third of the angels, and Michael and his 2/3 of the angels. The war happened, and the angels and Satan were cast down of heaven. And Jesus said that he saw Satan fall like lightning to the earth. Satan was cast to the earth. Now, Satan can go back and visit heaven, as we find out when we read Job 1. He was in heaven talking to God. But his normal abode is on the earth, prowling, looking for victims like a roaring lion, we're told. The fallen angels, these are the ones that sided with Satan or Lucifer in heaven. They were cast to the earth due to their rebellion. And that's reported many places in Revelations, but Hebrews 2:16 is another reference. And some of the fallen angels are bound. In Revelations 12, 3 through 9, we're told that some of the angels that transgressed and fell to earth are bound. But there are also the angels that fell that didn't get bound. And these are the angels, I believe, which we call demons in the Bible, demon possession, as related in Mark 5, where Jesus encountered the man that dwelled within the tombs and had no clothes, and he was so strong no one could bind him or hold him, and Jesus cast out the demons from his body and into a herd of swine, and the swine ran off and plunged into a lake. So those are the sort of color-coded them, so you know the blue guys are in, the good guys are in blue and the bad guys are in red. So the holy angels, you know, have appeared. They appeared to Mary to announce the birth of Jesus. They appeared to the shepherds in the fields tending their sheep at the birth of Jesus. They announced the birth of John the Baptist when to Zacharias in the temple, etc. So, and they were at Sodom and Gomorrah, helping Lot and his family escape. And as I said, in Mark 15, the fallen angels are depicted as being cast into the swine. And I just picked a few. If you Google it and look up where demonic possession or spirit, it's all throughout the New Testament. All of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John each have references to that. So I made a kind of a comparison chart here. So good angels, now we're talking about angels. So good angels, they do good to man. And they're messengers for God. They protect people. We're told that they don't have sex. They don't reproduce. And they do God's work. So, but fallen angels are essentially just like aliens. They do evil to man. They harm human beings. They do have sex. There's reporting of sex of aliens with human beings by the abductees, and I'll show you the Bible where it says that they have sex. They do evil, but they pretend to be gods. They ask for your worship, and they harm man, and as I said, they demand worship. So the one question that I've been asked in the past is, okay, is there any biblical reason to believe that there's a distant race of aliens somewhere? Maybe they're not visiting us. They're just out there doing their own thing. And I think that's unlikely. I think it's unlikely because of Romans 5:12, where it states that through one man sin entered the world. The Greek word that is used is cosmos, and they translate that as world. But it also, cosmos is what we understand as the entire universe. So that word has either the world or the whole universe. And I think it means that through one man, sin entered the whole universe. Romans 8:12 tells us that the whole of creation groans and suffers as a result of Adam's sin. So when he sinned, the whole creation was effective. Everything that was made, it was said on the sixth day when God finished his creative endeavors, that everything was very good. So Adam hadn't suffered hadn't sinned by then. And so if Adam's sin is imputed to the aliens, that seems unlike God, that he would afflict a race of people that are, large distances away from us, and they are being punished because somebody on earth, and we're the descendants of Adam. They have no connection, presumably whatsoever, with Adam if they're out there. So we're told in 1 Peter 3:18 that Jesus came to our planet to save us. He died once on the cross for our sins. His death was sufficient to cover all of the sins of the people here. And I don't think he's going to go to that other planet and die again. He died once and that was it. He's in heaven with the Father, and will come back someday when we don't expect it. So I believe it does not fit the character of God or the redemptive work of Jesus Christ to say that there's some alien race not making contact with us, but just out there doing their thing. Okay, so let's see if this works. So this is a excerpt from a website that Marty has found, and we're using it in our quad. It's called gotquestions.com. And the question is, the one group of individuals discussed in the Bible that I haven't talked about as either angels or demons is called the Nephilim. So let me see if this plays.
The following is a presentation of Got Questions Ministries.
Who were the sons of God and daughters of men in Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4? Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4 refers to the sons of God and the daughters of men. There have been several suggestions as to who the sons of God were and why the children they had with the daughters of men grew into a race of giants. That is what the word Nephilim seems to indicate. The three primary views on the identity of the sons of God are: 1, they are fallen angels; 2, they were powerful human rulers; or 3, they were godly descendants of Seth, intermarrying with wicked descendants of Cain. Giving weight to the first theory is the fact that in the Old Testament the phrase sons of God always refers to angels, Job 1 verse 6. The potential problem with this is in Matthew 22 verse 30, which indicates that angels do not marry. The Bible gives us no reason to believe that angels have a gender or are able to reproduce. The other two views do not present this problem. The weakness of views 2 and 3 is that ordinary human males marrying ordinary human females does not account for why the offspring were giants or heroes of old, men of renown. Further, why would God decide to bring the flood on the earth when God had never forbade powerful human males or descendants of Seth to marry ordinary females or descendants of Cain? The oncoming judgment of Genesis 6 verses 5 through 7 is linked to what took place in Genesis 6 verses 1 through 4. Only the obscene, perverse marriage of fallen angels with human females would seem to justify such a harsh judgment. As previously noted, the weakness of the first view is that Matthew 22 verse 30 declares, "At the resurrection people will neither marry nor be given in marriage. They will be like the angels in heaven." However, the text does not say angels are not able to marry. Rather, it indicates only that angels do not marry. Second, Matthew 22:30 is referring to the angels in heaven. It is not referring to fallen angels, who do not care about God's created order, and actively seek ways to disrupt God's plan. The fact that God's holy angels do not marry or engage in sexual relations does not mean the same is true of Satan and his demons. View 1 is the most likely position. Yes, it is an interesting contradiction to say that angels are sexless, and then to say that the sons of God were fallen angels who procreated with human females. However, while angels are spiritual beings, they can appear in human physical form. Mark 16 verse 5. The men of Sodom and Gomorrah wanted to have sex with the two angels who were with Lot. Genesis 19 verses 1 through 5. It is plausible that angels are capable of taking on human form, even to the point of replicating human sexuality and possibly even reproduction. Why do the fallen angels not do this more often? It seems that God imprisoned the fallen angels who committed this evil sin, so that the other fallen angels would not do the same, as described in Jude verse 6. Earlier Hebrew interpreters and apocryphal and pseudepigraphal writings are unanimous in holding to the view that fallen angels are the sons of God, mentioned in Genesis 6 verses 1 through 4. This by no means closes the debate. However, the view that Genesis 6 verses 1 through 4 involves fallen angels mating with human females has a strong contextual, grammatical, and historical basis.
God Questions Ministry seeks to glorify the Lord Jesus Christ by providing biblical answers to today's questions. Online at gotquestions.org.
Okay, and I sought a reference from ICR, and they also have on their webpage that they agree with that they believe that the fallen angels are the reason why the procreation of giants and why the flood was brought on the earth, because the angels had sinned and left their place in heaven. And there's a bunch of these pictures. I wanted to just show them. I really warn you, if you're talking to people who are not Christian, I would say just avoid these pictures that show people digging up or having large bones that they find, because a lot of them, I would say maybe all of them, but the ones that I've looked at are hoaxes. And they have pictures of a guy who's digging up an elephant skeleton, and then somehow they use Photoshop or something. So the internet is really a wary place to gain information. Interesting pictures, but I wouldn't use that as evidence. So what are the UFOs? So let me quickly go through some of the things that I'd like to cover on UFOs. I think there's maybe 3 different areas that would explain most all of the UFO sightings that people have. One is misunderstanding, the second one is lies, and the third are hoaxes. And obviously misunderstandings, people are not trained observers, although there are observers that are trained, and I'll go through those. So I do think there are sightings that are real, but I think most of the ones that people report are misunderstandings. Sometimes they're lies. People do things, strange things for money and fame. Lie, cheat, things like that. Our carnal nature. And then finally hoaxes. There's some pranksters out there that like to do crop circles, and a lot of that stuff has been debunked. And even the cattle mutilations and things like that are explained based on the government actually taking samples of cattle to look for mad cow disease, but they didn't want to disturb the public perception of the safety of the beef industry, so they chose to fly Black Hawk helicopters over, grab the cow, cut it open, take its eyes and its tongue where the instances of mad cow disease is shown, and drop the carcass on the ground. So most all of that can be explained. A lot of these pictures, the Roswell incident has all been declassified, and it was actually a spying mission that the U.S. was using to fly over the Soviet Union with these high-altitude balloons to look for indications of them detonating atomic weapons. The Nazis, the one in the far right, is a Nazi flying saucer. They had some very advanced aeronautic designs at the bottom. Underneath that one is a jet-powered U.S. flying saucer, and I'm sure you've seen the stealth bomber and the Blackbird. And those definitely, before they were declassified, if you saw a triangle flying in the air, it's probably 90 to 95% chance that was one of those aircraft being tested before they released the information they had it. But there's also sightings by people that are very well-trained observers, and airline pilots, astronauts. I'll go through some astronauts, military observers, radar operators, police, clergy, all of those people, multiple people. When you have multiple people seeing the same thing at the same time, there has to be something they're seeing. It can't just be a mass delusion. You know, that was one thing that they used to designate that Christ actually rose, because you can't have a mass hallucination of 500 people that see Christ rising into the clouds. It just, that doesn't work. So I found this stuff is from Chuck Meisler, so, but he reports that astronaut Wally Schirra, I think we older people remember that name, 68, he used the word Santa Claus, which is the code word for UFO near his spacecraft. Gordon Cooper, he reported seeing a green UFO that was also tracked by Australian radar. Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, the two gentlemen that landed on the moon, they said they saw lights on a nearby crater, and had some two large objects that were watching them. And astronaut John Baleha, a veteran of 5 shuttle missions, he reported that he saw an alien spacecraft that was detected by a ham radio operator. It says, "Houston, this is Discovery. We still have the alien spacecraft under observation." So these are the most well-trained, I would think, astronauts. If you're looking for an observer that is familiar with dealing with flying objects in outer space and things like that, these are the best trained people we have. So they're seeing something. You know, you wouldn't potentially ruin your career to say something if you didn't see something. So the question is, are they seeing something physical? Meaning, is it made out of a material? Does it have mass? Does it travel through the air like the spacecraft or the aircraft that we have? And all of the answers of the reports that you hear from the people they don't behave like physical objects. One is, the people have reported over and over that they see object flying maybe at 15,000 miles an hour, which is like an airline pilot, and then it makes a right turn, just an abrupt right turn, or it reverses direction. They've seen objects that fly through the air, and they make no sonic boom. So every object that we make that flies through the air that has a certain size, it makes a sonic boom. You know, and people report that the UFOs change size, they change colors, they disappear, they just vanish. They don't go off into the distance slowly, they just poof, they're gone. And they fly through solid objects like mountains. They see the flying saucers or whatever the object is fly into a mountain, and then they see it fly out the other side. That's not a material object. And so all of these sightings that these people who have tracked these things for over 50 years have seen behave in a way that doesn't obey the laws of physics that we know as being humans on Earth. And this guy, Gordon Creighton, he was the head of the magazine Flying Saucer Review. Now, these are people, I'm going to show you a list of experts that are secular, not Christian, experts on flying saucers and UFOs. And they all put their careers on the line by saying what I'll read you here. Creighton said he was head of Flying Saucer Magazine Review. There seemed to be no evidence yet that these craft or beings originate from outer space. The whole phenomena involves features that conflict with modern science. I don't believe, at the bottom it says, I don't believe that the great bulk of these phenomena or I do believe that the great bulk of these phenomena are what is called satanic. So here is a guy who's a publisher of Flying Saucer magazine saying he doesn't believe they're real. He believes it's some sort of a satanic phenomena. This is Jacques Vallée. He's a Frenchman. He was actually the man who was the model that was chosen in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. His whole career, he's published 8 books on UFOs, maybe more. He stated that I do not believe anymore that UFOs are simply the spacecraft of some race of extraterrestrial visitors. Spacecraft do not disappear by moving, or spacecraft did not disappear by moving away, but simply vanished on the spot. And they reported that they fly into the ground and they just disappear. And that's just physically impossible from what we know. He says, I propose that UFOs we see, among other things, a device that creates a distortion of the witness's reality designed to change their belief system. And they are helping to create a new form of belief in the public. Dr. Hynek, J. Allen Hynek, is probably the most well-known astronomer. He worked for the U.S. government for 20 years in the Air Force, serving as a scientific expert on UFOs. He ran the U.S. satellite optical tracking program for years. And he was pained when pushed to give a pronouncement on what he believed. He says, Hynek submitted that perhaps UFOs are part of a parallel reality slipping in and out of sequence with our own. This hypothesis obviously pained him as an empirical scientist. And then finally, John Keel, who has written many books on UFOs. Statistical data indicates UFOs are not tangible manufactured objects requiring fuel, maintenance, and logistical support. They are not permanently constructed of matter. So the UFO is mainly similar to all of the things that people have noted over the ages of demonic possession or demonic phenomena. And these are the experts. These are secular experts, not Christians. They're experts in their field. They're doing their credibility great harm amongst the fellow believers by reporting this. So I take my hat off to them. The other thing is, so we have the flying objects that are not congruent with physical reality. What about the alien abductions? Are those all freaky people that are making this stuff up to become famous or not? The answer is probably not. The three of the most famous abductions were one in Brazil, this Antonio Boaz. He was abducted. He said he was forced to have a sexual encounter with a female alien. Barney and Betty Hill of New Hampshire, they were taken as a couple up into an alien spacecraft where they were forced to have sex exams and reproductive material was removed from their body. And this guy, Travis Walton in Arizona, who was a logger driving home after they finished their work, and they stopped to look at a luminous object that was near the side of the road, and Travis got out and he was hit by a blue beam and fell to the ground, and his buddies took off, left him. And they came back a few minutes later after the glowing thing had gone, and he was disappeared. They looked all over, they couldn't find him, and he showed up about a week later telling about being on the inside of a spacecraft that he was taken up to. And these people, they've taken lie detector tests, they've been put under hypnosis, they've had everything that science knows how to do to test if they're lying, and it comes up that they're telling the truth. And this fellow, John Mack, has studied this encounter, the alien encounters, for years, and his belief is that there's millions of Americans that believe that they've had an encounter with aliens, and they've claimed to be abducted, undergone medical experiments, have sexual encounters, report burns, mutilations to their body, have smells like mustard gas, and it's all very, very similar to the occult. They have dizziness, nausea, confusion, despair. Their families don't believe them. They lose their jobs. These people are not doing it to become rich and famous. They're reporting it with great fear. And unfortunately, people are not treating them with humanity when they give these reports, because they think they're either loonies or they're just doing it to be famous. And this is an account I found which was typical. They said it was typical of the experience. They report that this lady, Ann Brooke, described her UFO experience. After my experience, I knew that I had a privileged glimpse of something infinitely wondrous and profound. My inner consciousness had undergone a complete and staggering metamorphosis. Those truths that I were taught for years by my church, my family, my parents, and my teachers were no longer valid to me. So the aliens, and this is a consistent theme, this is just one, but over and over and over, we've had situations in California where, I don't know if you were remembering, but there were, in 1997, a group called the Heaven's Gate group with a guy named Marshall Applegate. They committed mass suicide, 40 people, saying that they were committed suicide so the mothership could take them up and they would be taken to heaven somewhere. And then there's a group in France called the Raelians. They believe that humans were planted on Earth. They believe that Jesus, Buddha, Joseph Smith, all of the people that are of heads of religions in the world were produced by aliens. So there's awful things that are going on, and Bates, in his book, he believes, he has taken the time, and the movie in December will go into deep detail. He's interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people, and he's selected just a few, because you can't in an hour and a half give the stories in detail of thousands of people. So he's interviewed and has in his movie 6 or 7 people who have gone through traumatic operations under the hands of what the aliens have done. Alien messages are always similar to New Age beliefs, usually denying Jesus Christ as Son of God. They are very occult. And so I looked up what the New Age beliefs are, because I wasn't that familiar with them. So the primary feeling with the New Age movement is individuals are the primary source of authority and spiritual matters. So you're your own God. Okay, I'm my God, you're your God. So everybody is their own God. They envision a world developing through cycles, like a reincarnated cycle where astrology is a major factor. They believe in reincarnation, they believe in fortune telling, they believe in contacting the dead. Those used to be called seances, and now I guess the new word that Shirley MacLaine has invented is channeling. So you can talk to the dead people by going to someone who has the ability to contact them. And the main belief is that the humanity is coming to a new age known as the Age of Aquarius, the old song, and is characterized by love, joy, peace, abundance, and harmony. So they believe that heaven is coming to earth through some means, and I would suggest that it could be when the aliens come, that they will produce that story, that they come in peace and we're bringing heaven to earth, and just abandon everything, all your religion, and worship us. Carl Sagan, if some of you remember, a famous astronomer, he was on television with the show Cosmos years ago before he passed away. He also said very clearly, modern alien abduction experience is remarkably similar to common stories of demonic possession through the ages, through history. And all of the elements are the same. Sexually obsessed encounters with non-humans living in the sky. They walk through walls, they communicate telepathically, they perform breeding experiments. These are all things that are demonic in their nature. And there's also, I wanted to include this, there's a lady named Ruth Montgomery who is a New Age writer, and she's coined the term walk-in. A walk-in is an entity that is permitted. You actually permit the spirit to take over your body. And that allows that spirit to operate in certain ways. So walk-ins actually are what the Bible teaches as demonic possession. The man by the lake who Jesus cast the demons out, called Legion, he was demonically possessed. And 1 Timothy 4:1 said, the Spirit clearly says that in the last time some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things that are taught by demons. So I think that that's a pretty good warning. The one thing that Gary has found, and through a group called CE4, is really interesting. And he's, I think, the first one that's reported it in any great depth, is that when they're talking to people, the people who interview these abductees, if the person is a born-again, Bible-believing Christian, and they call on the name of Jesus Christ, the event, whatever it is, this alien encounter ceases. And I've got one example, but you can, it's in his book. I've referenced page 256 of this book right here. That he found that to be true. And this group, this CE4 group, is the abduction research team, and it's at alienresistance.org/CE4. And these are a group of Christians that were used to be New Age UFO hunters and alien abduction studying people. And they've come to Christ, and they've started to look at this abduction phenomena, and they found that it's controlled when you call upon the name of Jesus Christ for help. So I have one anecdotal thing that I excerpted from their book, but it says, this is one example of a fellow named Bill D. He's a born-again Christian, and his experience started in Christmas in Florida in 1976. It was late at night. He saw some lights outside his window that were kind of unusual, and he had a bunch of dogs that were barking, and they continued to bark even as the lights passed, and was unusual. He didn't usually see lights by his window. He went to bed, and immediately paralysis set in. And this is very, very typical. He was unable to cry out, and the next thing he knew, he was levitated. He felt like he was levitated above the bed, and he had the sensation that a pole was being inserted in his rectum. And by this time, he was just terrorized, but he couldn't scream. He couldn't communicate. He was paralyzed. He couldn't move his limbs. So what he did, he thought it was a satanic experience. He didn't believe it was aliens. So what he did was he called out, Jesus, Jesus, help me. And when he did, he felt like whatever was holding him in that position was hurt. And the pole was slowly pulled out of his rectum, and he fell and hit the bed. And that woke up his wife. And she said, why are you jumping on the bed? So he said, this is over. They found at least a dozen cases that people under prodding, they don't want to say this because these are UFO researchers and abduction researchers, and their credibility, their New Age belief will be harmed. But they admitted that they are actually seeing the same thing as this other group is. So both, again, the Christians and the secular scientists are seeing the same thing. So you know exactly what to do when you have an alien encounter. Call upon the name of Jesus like we always do. And I put this picture, so it's shocking. That's a picture of Gary on the left and a guy named Redfern, Nick Redfern, and he's on TV all the time. You see him on History Channel. He's called a UFO hunter, and he appears on a TV show called Ancient Aliens. And those two people agree. They both believe UFOs aren't real. They're some illusion or mirage. And they believe that the people that are encountering alien abductions are really being influenced by demonic possession. Except the New Agers, I had to find a New Age picture of a woman who's angry and shouting. So don't be deceived. Many people who say they've encountered aliens have described a reptilian likeness to their appearance. It's very interesting that Satan appeared to Eve in the Garden of Eden as a snake. And people see three forms of aliens. They see small guys that are a grayish color, and they're called the Greys. They see a larger entity that has the face of a reptile with slits for eyes, and those are called the reptilians. And then the third one is called the Nordics, and those are tall, 7-8 foot tall men with white beards and white blue eyes, so they look like Norsemen. But we're told the false signs will be done by demons according to the work of Satan and all the powers and signs and lying wonders in 2 Thessalonians. In conclusion, we've seen the facts that show that I believe in my heart that UFOs are demonic in nature. They come from the devil, and they're operated by fallen angels, and they're a trap for people. It's one of Satan's tricks, and he's trying to orchestrate the end times to take as many of us Christians away from Jesus Christ as he possibly can. And the UFOs are just a momentous deception, and we're being robbed potentially of our faith. So we have to stay in the Word, true to the Word, love Jesus Christ, and always call upon him when we need him. And this article has come out where churches, and I think we've seen this over and over, are embracing this new ecumenical interfaith agenda where they're denying Jesus Christ. We're now politically correct, so we can't say anything that isn't considered politically correct or corrupt to society. We're called haters or something phobes. But the New Age movement lures them into worshiping Mother Earth. We've seen this in the past, a belief in reincarnation and worshiping false gods. It's just the same old thing over and over under a new banner. So stand fast and spread the word. The devil's deception will influence many, but show the signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. So spread the word that aliens, UFOs are under the power of devils, and that's why we're being afflicted. Society is being afflicted with them. And as always, to remember, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places, from Ephesians. So we trust in our Lord Jesus Christ. We're his servants and his flock. And this is my presentation, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. So, thank you.